Benny, a lot of young boys grow up. They want to be a professional athlete or a rock star. You're the drummer of Gaslight Anthem. Were you like that when you were a kid? Rock and roller or professional athlete?
I think I realized really young that professional athlete was out of the cards. I always loved sports, big fan of sports, but I never really excelled particularly at any sport. None of them came easy to me. So I started playing drums, and that did come easy to me. That was something that I always say to people now, I was like, yeah, I was a pretty bad athlete when I was a kid. I was all right at basketball, baseball, just okay, decent catcher, but I couldn't hit. And but I never worked in any of them. I never took the time to really practice and get into it. And then I started playing music, and that was one of those things that working doesn't feel like practice. You're just doing it because you want to. So there's definitely more of a natural inclination to do that. I even had a fictional rock band in 3rd grade that was we were building schematics for a stage in this kid's backyard and stuff like that.
What was the name of this fictional band?
Called Red Hot.
Red Hot?
Yeah, and I was the lead vox for Red Hot. Yeah.
Why music so early, and why the drums? What attracted you?
Well, music I guess I just grew up with. It was always a part, like we were talking about earlier with the family. My father was a big fan of soul music and jazz and stuff like that. I actually played the flute and played jazz flute, which is funny now because of Anchorman, but he actually did do it. And he was really into soul, Motown, old R&B. So, I mean, I always remember from him, Temptations and Four Tops and Aretha Franklin and stuff like that. And then my mom is a gigantic classic rock fan, to the point where, when I was in high school, we drove her to a Queen convention in Ohio to meet all the Queen pen pals she had and
Wow.
stuff like that. So she was literally dragging me to record shows and stuff like that. And I remember the basement of the Holiday Inn in Springfield on 22 used to do a record show maybe once a month, where all the local vendors and dealers would show up, and she'd be all over that. So I have a lot of old Guns N' Roses picture discs and weird stuff like that from those days. So I think it was kind of instilled in the music thing. I always had a love for music, especially rock and roll. And drums was way more random. I remember everyone was chasing these 2 girls in elementary school, Lauren Schnell and Ashley Palmer. I remember the 2 of them. And they joined school band. So all the dudes started joining school band. And it was pretty random. They're like, what instrument do you want to play? And I'm like, yeah, drums. Sounds good, Made you do this little preliminary thing, and then I was a drummer.
What a shock that you would get into music because women were attached, young girls were attached.
Yeah.
That's probably a part of every rock and roll story at some point, I would think.
I think that's probably the motivation for every male story, most male stories throughout the world. I'd say that's the motivation, money and women.
It's good motivation.
Maybe that's the American motivation. I'm not sure.
I have to take you back to last summer. You guys are playing in Chicago. My brother and I go to watch your band, and then you do me this tremendous favor and invite me backstage, hop on your tour bus. What stood out for my brother was he said that as you and I are talking, I'm asking you a million music questions, and you're asking me a million sports questions because you wanted to talk about stuff that wasn't work for you.
Yeah.
And so sports is your diversion, whether it's the Yankees or the Nets. That's how you relax.
It's true. Yeah, and especially for some reason with me, stats. Ever since I was a little kid, I just had this weird thing for the accumulation of statistics and how they go up and down and the movement of it, to the point my mom used to buy me an almanac every year, and I'd literally just read the little graphs and stuff like that. And that's a big thing for me. For some reason, it's one of those things I can just focus on and kind of takes my mind off everything. And now I just love it. I need to do it,
You've told me an incredible story, so I'm just going to make you repeat it. When Gaslight Anthem is just getting off the ground, you had to decide between full-time investment into the band or actually going to work to do stats for the NBA.
Yeah, that is true. My friend Luke Bodenstein, right before that, had a job like I said, doing IT work for the NBA, and he offered me that job, literally sitting at games, logging rebounds, which, I mean, I know it's, it might seem silly, but that's pretty much like exactly what I would like to do with my nights, and if you could get paid for that, that's crazy, So, even to backtrack, I don't know if you remember Tecmo Bowl on Nintendo. I don't know if that was before games saved statistics. Like you could just play a game and then the game was over and you played another game. You didn't have seasons and stuff like that. And I used to play with the Raiders because they had Bo Jackson, Marcus Allen in the backfield. And I would run a play, pause, log the stats, run a play, log the stats, and then I did my game stats. I'd do a 16-game season. I'd have season stats. I'd do averages, like all that. And I was pretty young, just sitting in a basement, like logging stats for Tecmo Bowl. So
you're sure by telling me all this stuff you're not killing your rock cred here? That
No.
People who go to watch you use that power and speed on the drums and actually you're a stat head at heart?
Rock and roll is about doing whatever you want to do and not feeling bad about it, man. So if that's what I find my joy in logging stats, then I don't care what people think about it. But yeah, so he offered me this job, logging stats, which I gave you the preface of how big of a nerd I am. And yeah, this was right when Gaslight was starting. We just recorded the demo, and it was really early on before I had any idea it could be anything that could take care of my life, like it has. And I told him, I'm like, man, I'm starting to fall in love with this. Like, I don't want to, I need to see it through. I can't stop now, And he's came to see us at the Court Tavern, took me aside, one of those man-to-man moments, and said, listen, I think you should take the job. I don't think it's going to pan out the way you want it to, and this and that. And I was like, nah, man, I got to go for it, you know how it is. And he's like, all right. And then, it's one of the few good decisions I've made.
However many albums and sold albums later, have you had a little fun with him? Have you ever maybe sent him
of course.
last album debuted on Billboard at number 3? Maybe you want to give him an article that
I never
says that.
sent him the numbers. That'd be kind of egotistical.
But you're a numbers guy. You're a numbers guy.
Yeah, I like sports. I would never boast my own numbers. That's that. But I do. He's also the biggest Philly fan I know. So anybody who roots for the Eagles gets it hard from me. That's a fact.
Now, you guys are entertainers. People buy tickets to come and see you play. Thousands of people come to see you play at some of the festivals you guys have played at, up to 30,000, 40,000 people. Do you ever feel a kinship with professional athletes in that way, that you need to be on your game, you need to entertain? Now, you might get cheered, you might get booed, just like a professional athlete. Have you ever thought about that relationship?
Yeah, the thing I've been thinking about recently is, if a bunch of people went to pay money for our show and started booing us, we must be doing something really wrong, So that aspect of it, I think there's a different relationship between music people and their fans, because, I rely on these people to come see my band for my life to exist the way it does, you know what I mean? And usually I think people are fans of more teams than players. You're really paying for the team, not, I guess there is a connection there. But the thing I think about a lot now is, as I'm getting older, the physical side starts getting a little gnarlier, just all the traveling. And now we play for when I'm writing these really fast, punk rock songs 8 years ago, I had no idea I was going to be doing an hour and a half of them. I never thought I'd be playing that long. So sometimes I get home from a tour and I'm physically shot, and I got to leave again soon. And I think of it kind of like an off season, where I'm I got to stay in shape now. I got to go running. I got to do all this, or else the first couple shows back, I'm going to feel like a bulldozer hit me, So I do look at some time off as an off season now. And Kobe inspires me.
Kobe inspires you? What,
Yeah,
his work habits?
Yeah, guys like him and Mayweather, I think of those dudes. Because music and sports are the same in that a lot of people have some kind of talent for something. But the thing that really separates people who make it and don't make it is some huge part of it is luck, which if anyone forgets about is just a jerk. But the other part of it is that, like, work. It's the work ethic, you know? Like, there's a lot of, it's important to remember there's a lot of people just as good as you, and you got to stay sharp, because, you know, if you're better than somebody's going to be aiming to get better than you. And that's why I always want to, like, just keep getting better, you know?
I think you had something working your favor, though, too. And I think I had this working in my favor. I knew by the time I was 12 years old that I wanted to be a sports journalist. You have said that you knew by the same age, 12 or 13, you want to be in the music business. You weren't sure how you were going to navigate your way through it, but it was going to be a band, promoting bands, something along those lines.
Yeah.
How did that help you get to where you are today?
I mean, I don't know. I guess like, I always looked at it as some mix between just, you know, dedication and delusion. You know what I mean? In a way, like, you need to be so, like, dedicated to something 100%. Where I went homeless for 2 years to be in a full-time band. Not like living on the streets, but, you know, Motel 6 in my brother's house. Not as bad as
Ever sleep in your car?
Yeah, but not for that reason. So, so I mean, like, but there is something where, you know, there was a point. I didn't get to quit my job, my full-time job, to do Gaslight till I was 27. And there is a point once you hit that post-college age, and there's nothing to show for it. Like, I have no education, I have no real work skills, and, you know, family and stuff is seeing this from the outside, and they don't know you're at practice 3 days a week, and you're writing songs, and you're pushing, and you're booking shows, and you're doing so much stuff. Because if that, like, money, real-life aspect isn't a part of it, people start to wonder what you're doing, and if this is, like, the best decision for you and stuff like that. And fair enough, you know, they're looking in your own best interest, but that's when it got hairy. You know what I mean? Like, when it goes from, like, childhood dream that's cool and romantic and kind of has this thing to it, to, like, guy in his mid-20s still trucking around, like, what are you doing, bro? Like, there's that aspect of it. And Gaslight was my last band. Like, it was going to be not the last time I'd play music, but it was the last one, and I was going to, like, try and take somewhere.
How many bands did you try, and I don't want to say fail with, but how many bands had you been in that hadn't achieved the level of success that you wanted it to before that?
Besides for, like, fill-in things, bands that I started from the ground up that I tried to build and turn in, Gaslight was my fifth. And then there was a lot of little trials and errors and fill-in jobs and things like that along the way.
I've heard your music described as, I want to make sure I get this right because I pulled it off the internet. One guy had a good description.
Everything on the internet is real, by the way.
Absolutely. Wikipedia. I looked at your Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
Roots.
Have you read yours?
I have, yeah. I have. It's not that great. I should have a little more info in there, but I can't do it myself. You got to have somebody else put it on there for you.
Yeah, it'd be presumptuous to update your own Wikipedia. Yeah.
Rootsy punk, which I thought was good.
Okay.
Soulful rock and roll punk, which I thought was pretty good. But here's what I come away with. Brian Fallon, your lead singer, was obviously very influenced by Springsteen. His voice, you can even hear it in his voice. I see you guys as, you're going to start to think that they sound a little bit like Springsteen. You're going to come away thinking that they're the Clash. What do you think of that?
I like it, you know, because the two references you made are Bruce Springsteen and the Clash.
How would you describe it? How would you describe what you're doing?
Anytime anyone asks me, I'm just like rock and roll. Because, I mean, even all the things you just mentioned, like, you know, roots, soul, punk, rock, like, we all just mentioned the same things. They're all rock and roll to some aspect, you know. They all came from the same thing. So, I don't know. I have a hard time describing music, and when anybody asks, I usually just kind of throw my hands up. I'm like, I don't know, man. You know, because it's a mix of, you know, when you write rock and roll and you're not, you know, you're not the Mars Volta or something where you're writing such progressive things that you're literally the first band to ever do it. You know, like rock and roll bands like feed off history, you know what I mean? And you take from things that were good. And your pool of influence is a huge thing when writing rock music, you know, especially since most of us aren't trained musicians. You know, you're all writing and playing out of your ear and what you think is good, and you get skilled through the years. But when you're pulling from, you know, things you may not even remember, you know, deep in your subconscious, some demo I listened to when I was 12 and, maybe really had an impact on me. And then, 20 years later, I write a beat that could have been this kid's beat. I could have stolen it from something I listened to 20 years ago, and I have no idea. But that's what's cool about it all, and that's what's great about being in one of those bands, is because, I'm able to, write myself into the narrative now. Write the band into the narrative where, that might happen to somebody else. Somebody listens to this when they're a kid, and somehow it makes their way into the music,